Hello, and welcome to Series 3. You have voted, and I am not surprised. With a tied vote between Tobuck and Colthagian Republic last time, who would have guessed that you would choose Colthagian Republic this time? I am just completely shocked. Alright. Legends say that the city of Colthage was founded in 1742 BLB, before lunar, whatever, by Queen Zeto, who, banished by her father, led a group of refugees from the city of lunar banishment, that's what that stands for, to establish a new home for themselves. In reality, it had likely been established by Zonasian colonists from the west, who founded many other cities during their time, such as Hippone and Zebenope. Over the following centuries, the mercantile Zonican citizenship spread, grew, and prospered. Soon, Colthage become the hegemon of northern Zebrica, and one of the great empires of the ancient world. But Colthage was not without a rival. In the north, across the Middle Sea, Carthage opposed Carthaginian expansion. Not long after Colthage had founded the colony of New Colthage on Scarlet Island, an open war erupted between the two powers in 552 BLB. Despite an initial naval advantage, Colthage eventually lost and was forced to cede its overseas colonies. This was merely the beginning of the end. In 490 BLB, Carthians sacked and destroyed Colthage, and the remains of their fallen empire were annexed by Zur. After Colthage regained its independence in 15 BLB, its zebras attempted to re-establish their dominance once more, but they never reached the heights of their ancestors. While Colthage was weakened by corruption and infighting, the hordes of Quagatai descended upon Zonasia in 521 ALB. One by one, cities fell, and Colthage lost its freedom once again. This period was a dark age in the history of Zonasian civilization, as the Khans of Quagatai demanded tribute and enslaved thousands. Yet hardships made Zoasian tenacious. In 825 ALB, 300 years after the fall of Hippone, Zenuzel Zedeld, the priest of the town of Zoe, started revolt against the local Quagatai warlords. He declared that all Zoetian zebras should be free and united under a single banner. His uprising inspired resistance all along the north coast. And in a decade, all of Zonesia had been liberated, and Quagatai collapsed into a civil war. Yet the dreams of united Zonasia nation were shattered, as Warzina and Zumedia refused to join. Thus, the Colthagian Republic was established soon after. Conflict arose between Federalists and Centralists, but after a brief civil war, the latter stood triumphant. In 975 ALB, Zamakar Zarka, okay, I know, wow. Okay, became the Sulfurate of Colthage. He turned the nation from a republic into an oligarchical dictatorship and hired an influential group of academics known as Scientific Clique to help run the nation. Their economic policies imported the Industrial Revolution to Colthage, but at the cost of selling off property to foreign investors. Zamakar also established a treaty of friendship and mutual support with the heirs of their ancient rival, Wingbardi. But soon after the new millennium began, the industrializing Carthaginian nation faced yet another foreign threat. Colthage was among the last nations invaded by the infamous Storm King. They fared no better than the others. The army was destroyed, Zamakar perished, and his sons fled into the mountains. to wage a guerrilla war against the invaders. Much of the wealth of Colthage was seized and progress on modernization was halted. But within months, the Storm King had been killed in the Battle of Ain Trot Garrett against Hippogriphia. The Cothagian Senate gathered once more and elected a new sulfurate, Zal-Athel Zarka, son of Zamakar. Colthage is free once more, but plagued by internal unrest following the Storm King's invasion. Internal factions vie for the suffrage support, and the re-established military consists largely of unreliable mercenaries. There's unrest in the west and east, as constitutionalists and Coltvins oppose the suffrage dictatorial rule. Quagate is resurgent in the south, having seized Coltdar during the chaotic aftermath of the Storm King's death. Can Zalathaw Zarka solve these problems, or will Colthage fall again? Well, we'll just have to see, won't we? And, let's placate them. Wink. But yes, I think for this path, I'm gonna be doing a bit of Coltavan unrest. During the Storm King's invasion, the zebras of the eastern provinces of Koltva took their mountains with their belongings, hiding what they could from the greedy Yeti. After Storm King's death, the celebrations quickly turned sour, as it became clear Colthage had been too weak to protect Koltva. The rich and powerful Cothagian landowners justified their rule by claiming to be their defenders, that they had failed in their duty. So what right did they have to keep the common zebra in chains? Our rebel leader, Zeshmahan Zesh Zeirutid, managed to rally the Coltvins to his cause and is continuing his wars of resistance against the Cothagian government. If we do not deal with this unrest in the region, this could spill over to a full-blown revolt. After Storm King's invasion, the son of influential West Colthagian landowner Zano Zeirutid directly contested Zelathel Zarka in the elections for the position of sulfurate. Despite the results having already been decided before the election, he still campaigned and was able to gather significant support among the urban youth and popular assembly. After the election, and Zeirathel Zarka's overwhelming victory, he declared that the election was rigged and invalid, but before the authorities could crack down on him for inciting unrest, he and several supporters had fled across the border to Zemedia. We cannot for a moment believe that this would be the end we see him. We cannot for a moment believe that this would be the end we see of him, and we need to prepare for a possible uprising led by Mizelquatid's supporters. The presumed strength of the rebel movement is dangerously high. Understood. And they escaped to cross the border to Zemedia. Apparently that doesn't exist. They in Zumbo then? Oh my goodness, the Romans! Not the Romans. Die! Die! Faction support. The Sulfurites cannot rule alone. Behind every leader, there are powerful political groups keeping them in power. The Zeiriutids that ruled over Colthage for decades cemented power with the aid of scientists and the military. During the time, the landowners grew rich and powerful, and now extend strong control over their huge tracts of land. Recently, two organizations have been rising in popularity. Constitutionalists wish for a return to democratic government and an end to the Zarkas, the Harmonites go a step further, seeking to bring radical changes to the nation and rebuilding among harmonic lines. The loyal factions will provide bonuses to the nation, and disloyal factions will grind the nation to a halt. These bonuses or penalties increase with their power. However, powerful factions may push their own agendas, or even plot against the Sulfurate if disloyal. So the ones with low power are the ones with least loyalty. Cool. And then, that'll be fine. Nobody cares about any of that stuff, right? I'm sure it'll be just fine. Just fine. So I think it's a waste of time to be garrisoning this territory. Like, come on, what's the point? I think they're gonna be just peaceful people that aren't gonna try to hurt us in any way. So why would we fight against them when they're just peaceful beings being chill, right? Right? I think that's true. I mean, why wouldn't it be? And that'll work because, well, I hopefully won't be this nation for too long. Okay. Let's see. We are currently. Oh, that's not great. We are currently Zelathael Zarka, the heir of Zamilcar. As the son of Zamilcar Zarka, former head of the powerful Zarka family and longest-serving Sulfurate of Carthage, Zelathael grew up in Carthaginian high society during a period of peace and prosperity. Since his birth, he was seen as the successor of his father, and thus received far more attention than his siblings. He was educated in history, military, science, and politics, becoming fascinated with ancient Colthage in the process. His love for his homeland grew as rapidly as the size of his ego did. By the time he became an adult, he saw himself as the embodiment of Zeirutid civilization and was ready to succeed his aging father, who was preparing to retire. However, everything changed when the Storm King attacked. Everything changed when the Storm King attacked. Avatar, funny. Despite joining his father in the defense of the city, the Storm King's forces overwhelmed the defenders. Zamilcar perished in the chaos, and Zelathael was forced to abandon the city of Carthage with his sister and 2 brothers. The Zebras fled high into the Elodid range to lead a guerrilla force to harass the Storm King's army, as it continued to rampage in northern Zebrica. When the news of the Storm King's death reached Zelathael, he led his forces to the capital and executed those who had surrendered to the enemy. With the city secure, he was seen as a liberator by many, but did not hesitate to crack down on any opposition to the Zeirutid rule. He turned to the warlords that had risen up throughout Colthage, and those who would not step into line were quickly taken out. Elections were soon held, which were claimed to be rigged, and the Senate approved Zelathael as the successor of his father. Now the new Sulfurate, he has enough strength and support to keep power, and his position is a precarious one. Scientists and militarists have taken advantage of the chaos, rebuilding their power. In the west, the anti-Zeirutid constitutionalist movement is plotting against his rightful rule, while in the east, the Colthagans are rising up against their landlords. Only time will tell if he is able to continue the legacy of his father, the position he was groomed for, or if the house of cards collapses around him. When the Storm King invaded us with his army, We initially resisted and fought back, before realizing the mad conqueror strategy was without flaw. Instead of continuing to fight in vain, we sought to negotiate with him, and eventually managed to sign a deal that spared us from doom. Angered by our initial resistance, the Storm King sacked our largest cities and burned down many buildings. He then demanded we pay hefty tribute, and seized all our artifacts. Our people are angered by our failure to protect them, and our economy is ailing. Army of mercenaries. Colthage military is always Yep, just like Carthaginians. Yep. I could see the comparisons. Colthage military has always relied heavily on mercenaries, albeit during Zebrica's reign, a professional army was slowly being built. The army was unable to survive the Storm King's invasion, and was scattered to the winds. All that remains is the elite sacred band of Colthage, which faithfully followed Zeirutid to victory. After the Storm King's death, the Cothagian army was quickly rebuilt by relying once again on mercenaries, recruiting both from home and abroad. These soldiers, however, are nowhere near as reliable as properly trained warriors. Makes sense. Political instability. The Colthagian Republic has been plagued by political instability since its establishment. A civil war was fought between Centralist and Federalist, and Zebrica practically abolished the constitution, making Colthage into an oligarchical dictatorship. Yet successful economic reforms managed to calm the populace, and the situation finally seemed stable. Then the Storm King arrived. Now Zebrica is dead, and Zeirutid's hold over the country is tenuous at best. Something must be done about the dissenting voices within the elite of Colthage, so order can be restored. Factionalism. The rule of the Sulfurate is not absolute, and political power within Colthage is distributed among various factions that gain their support from different segments of society. Loyal factions provide bonuses, while disloyal factions give malices. The scale of these modifiers depends on the power of each faction. I like those consumer goods, and the daily political power is nice, though I'm still losing political power for that. That's not good. The Zebrica family is more than just a powerful political family. To many Colthagians, the Zeiriuds are exemplars of the power and glory of the country's history. By invoking the family name, we will be able to appoint some loyalists to important bureaucratic positions, which should allow us some political momentum to deal with the hampered economy and unrest in the provinces. These guys should start getting more rebellious. The Constitutionalist Conspiracy. Zas and Zag, thank you for coming on such short notice, but I could not leave these rumors unanswered. Zeirutid stared at his brothers, Zeirutid and Zago, his front hooves supporting his chin. The sun had already set, but the Sulfurate's office was well lit, their father's portrait even receiving its own lamp, bringing even more attention to the centerpiece of the room. So what do we have on Zeno Mizelquaidzit and the Constitutionalist? No problem at all, Zeirutid. I summarized all the information we have at the moment. Zazdrubal retrieved a clipboard from his saddleback and gave it to the Sulfurate, whose eyes scanned the report. It seems the conspiracy had festered in every institution, the military, the bureaucracy, and even among criminals. Especially in the West is all. Zago cut in. Despite the serious subject, his voice was warm, and he seemed hardly concerned. Smugglers run the border between Hippogriff, Zemudia, and the states of Tefamenal and some Cismeres. Zeirutid sighed. Here I thought we had to deal with Zeno in the election. The citizens of Colthage rejected his lies. Now he thinks they want him back. Zago grimaced, threading carefully with his impatient brother. Mizelquaidzit claims that our family has destroyed the old republic. This makes his supporter a mix of nostalgic romantics and radical students, and he knows we can't touch him as long as he hides across the border. Zastrudbul. Zathel tried to contain the anger welling up in his core. Prepare options for the reinforcing the western garrisons. Zago, I want you to investigate our Xano supporters and what his plan is. The two Zarka brothers nodded. And one last thing. No word about this to Zaphod. Zazrubal and Zago looked a bit uneasy at the exclusion of their sisters, but they left the Sulfur's office without progress. The exile can bark, but can he bite? Eastern Garrison reinforced. Okay, let's see. How can I... Okay, this would stop him from gaining resistance, so I don't want that. Okay, this... Okay, I'm just gonna ignore those then. Until I could get a lot of resistance. I mean, it's growing at a good rate. I'm gaining no support because I have no garrisons up. I wonder if I just, like, move all my boats over there, if I can just have my new self get them, right? I'm sure that's how it works, right? Professor Balazar Tid of the University of Colthage was found dead yesterday morning at the archaeological dig site in the ancient Cothagian colony of New Colthage in modern-day Sycamion. The professor was well renowned among the Colthagian academic and archaeological communities and was a forerunner in the study of early Colthagian civilization. He had traveled to the island of Sarklet in Sycamon to continue his work of the excavating the remains of the town. Early reports say that he was found having been beaten, strangled, shot, and stabbed with his own pickaxe. Okay then, local authorities have yet to bring forth any subjects, but the Simian authorities assured us that they are treating the matter with utmost urgency. Colthage's ancient history in Griffonia has always been controversial to many Griffins, who reject the idea of substantial Zebrican civilization on their continent, or even deny any meaningful interaction between our two worlds in the past. This flies in the face of contemporary evidence that Professor Balazar Zeirutid and many others in both Colthage and Griffonia have uncovered, along with the historical accounts and events such as the famed Carthaginian general Gripio Zebricanus. Scipio. Genius! Who conquered the island of Scarlet for the Carthian Republic over 1,500 years ago. The Persia's death has sparked outcry and mourning across Colthage. Protests have already started in the universities, and there are many in the Senate who are calling for a firm response to such a crime. We must trust the Sycamon will handle this well. Sycamon must apologize and give us full compensation for this crime. So, them? Sure, we'll demand it. The murder riots. Over the past 24 hours, the protests, which initially began in the university's response to Balazar Zeirutid's murder, have intensified and spilled outwards, with countless angry young Colthagians taking to the streets. These protests have very quickly morphed into protests directed against the Zeirutid government. Many have latched onto a ridiculous conspiracy theory that because Balazar criticized the government prior to the departure, that he was in fact assassinated by the Colthagian agents. Believers in this theory therefore blame Zelethel for his death. In major cities, the protesters have attacked government buildings and are demanding political reform for an end to the Zeirutid administration. However, local police forces have been able to quell the unrest in most places, although the underlying issue remains. Until things die down, we can use this as an opportunity to hunt down dissenters and lock them away before they have a chance to stir up any more trouble in the future. This can work to our advantage. So, where's this crackdown on the students? Nah, I think it'll be fine. You know, I think we'll be fine, you know? The parishes of Simeon refused our demand. An official statement by the Simeon ambassador in Colthage, published in the major newspaper, he pointedly declined to apologize for the murder of Professor Zeirutid. He also revealed that the investigation launched by the Simeon government has thus far failed to uncover any evidence or even any suspect. Despite this stunning display of incompetence, they refuse to assume any responsibility for Zeirutid's death and have rejected our reasonable demands of compensation out of hoof. A show of blatant disrespect toward the professor's contributions to understanding of our shared histories. It seems this provocation gesture has inflamed tensions across the country, leading to an explosion of anti-Griffin sentiment in the press. The diplomatic breach caused by the incident will take some time to heal. It's obvious where Simeon stands. Yeah, how dare they? Zarka's Crossroad. The traditional start of the Colthagian political year was a speech by one of the sulfrates before the Senate. As Zelithal Zarka was the only sulfrate for now, it was he who stood proudly on the rostrum, like a captain staring out over the sea. Although the leader of Colthage knew this place was more treacherous than Zarko's domain, many of the senators were old and had seen his father deliver speeches from the stand. A few of them had been colleagues of Zelithal's grandfather even. The sulfrate quickly glanced at his brothers, who sat on the first row of benches, and then at the old president of the Senate. The zebra nodded and gave permission for the sulfrate to speak as an honored guest of the ancient institution. Colthagians, esteemed members of the Senate, we stand at a crossroad. To our west is the road against which my father has often cautioned. A warning I will repeat today. The sulfrate's eyes shined proudly as his voice bellowed powerfully full of the chamber. Pushed on by foreign agitators and jealousy, there are those who call our noble republic a sham, who would call the Zarka family despots. I will not stand for accusations of tyranny when we all remember life under Yeti occupation. Murmurs of approval. That makes sense. Yeah, I agree. The tyrant did not vanish. We drove him out, and it has cost us dearly. The Zarkits bled for the Republic, and we shall not let that sacrifice be undone by so-called constitutionalist agitators and saboteurs. The sulfrate let the cheers from the non-constitutional senators die down before continuing, trying to disregard this cold stare from his sister, Zaphod. Then to the east, we find the opportunist. While we were weak, they armed themselves. Coltvan separatists terrorize our economy, and honest citizens, while some in this chamber call for dialogue and peace branches, honorable Colthagians there is but one answer to treason. Zarka's supporters roared, and Zolthov grinned, basking in the glory. I see a path before us, venerable senators, shown by my father's sacrifice. It leads to prosperity and glory. Walk with me, and I shall lead Colthage to a new golden age. It took minutes for the president to bring the Senate to order, but Zelithal had acquired the momentum he needed. The Zeirutid dynasty stands at the helm. You know, we don't really need to defeat the protests, right? Like, that's not really a big deal. I think they'll calm down on their own. Yeah, probably will, you know. But yes, I think that'll be the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of this new series. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell button. And as always, peace.